Hi, and welcome to the virtual Fire and EMS Town Hall. I'm your Fire Chief Barrett Dorner. We're going to get started with a look back. I took over in January of this year, but these problems date back even over a decade ago. Back in 2012, Chief then Todd Walters successfully implemented automatic aid agreements with Northwood and Allen Clay, the goal being getting more crews on scene, filling some important roles, but this was kind of that initial indication that this was no longer sustainable to do as just Lake Township. Fast forward to 2014. Here's a quote from then Chief Bruce Mortz. Issues facing the Lake Township departments are similar to those facing volunteer departments across the country, he said. He's paraphrased there. Personnel often have jobs outside the community and have to balance their family responsibilities and other demands with the duties of the department. So we're seeing where we're starting to notice that our volunteers are paid per call folks, the folks who respond from home. We'll talk about the terminology in a bit, but we're starting to see even in 2014 that we're starting to lose some of those people in terms of their ability to commit time. And this is all as our run volume's going up. It's becoming harder, he said in 2014, getting volunteers and having people available. 2 years later, 2016, daytime fire station staffing was added. That's been sporadic as the budget allows. We can't ask these people to do that day in and day out. And what he's talking about there is the volunteers having to come into the station 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day because that's where our run volume was getting. Our average was below 4 a day, but you could have busier days where you've dropped everything, you've left your family, you've left a meal, and you get essentially, for lack of a better term, stuck at the station for hours because you're just going on these back-to-back runs. And that's a lot to ask of people that left thinking, looking at their significant other saying, hey, honey, I'll be back in an hour. It's possible the increase in runs will eventually require paid personnel to be on duty 24 hours a day, Chief Mort said at the time, adding other area departments have implemented daily staffing to meet that rising demand. And again, this is focused on the fire department. At the time and currently, we have EMS staffing, and they are cross-trained, but this was talking specifically about, look, we have to start addressing that fire side as well. Just last year in 2022, fire service today is in some way in trouble. Volunteerism is a dying breed, and that is all across the country, not just here, Mort said. We have to do something full-time, whether we're part of the fire district or not. The fire district study should give the township a very good roadmap on what direction it needs to take. That roadmap has plans in there, even if we don't go the fire district route. The problem is, while that is a solution to some of our issues, that takes time. And we knew we need to do something for Lake Township sooner rather than later. In March 2023, we held a community Q&A session here at Station 28 in Millbury, where I'm recording this right now. Station 27 is in Walbridge, and Station 26 is our administration building with the medic unit and the rescue, which you'll see shortly. So we had a Q&A. We tried to get expectations from the community. In April 2023, our need is immediate. Administrator Mark Hummer said, we need to do something now for our residents. And this was in discussions about, do we ask for a levy? We're looking at a 4.2 mil levy. And kind of gauging the feedback from the folks at that meeting. And we so appreciate them being involved in that, in the democratic process of being at those meetings and having their say. After the meeting in April 2023, Trustee Chairman Ken Gilsdorf said that the Lake Township Fire Department should be staffed with 15 people to fully handle the volume of calls. That speaks to the number of people we need on scene to handle larger incidents, including car accidents, which are if not weekly for us, more often than that, and also fire incidents that require more staffing. Trustee Richard Welling said that the levy would fund hiring 4 full-time staff for the fire department. Volunteers who are paid per run would continue to round out the department. So we've tweaked the numbers a little bit. We're looking at hiring 3 full-time per day on an ABCD rotation, which means you work every 4 days. So in all, we're looking at using this money to hire 12 full-time personnel. He went on to say they have like 3 runs, one after the other. And after a while, it just burns your people out, Trustee Welling said. We need to add on some additional people full-time to back up the volunteers. And that's what so much of this is. Backing up the people that are able to commit their time, who have been giving that time for years, but taking some of that load off their shoulders when they're looking at their kids for the first time in a week and having to decide between going on a run or running out or staying at home and seeing their families. Trustee Lori Davis said the township taxpayers would absolutely support a fire levy. I feel like these residents will take care of themselves, she said. In June 2023, it was decided by the trustees that the Lake Township voters, you, will decide in November, just a few weeks away, depending on when you're watching this, maybe even closer at this point, on a $4.2 million levy to fund a full-time fire department. That's been 11 years in the making. 11 years of saying, look, this isn't going to last forever. We've got a really good deal right now. We're only paying people when we need them. That return on investment's amazing, but it's not working for today's situation. And here's today's situation. Demand is up. Our volunteer numbers are down, and that is a national problem. That is not just a Lake Township problem. Paramedics are going elsewhere, also a national problem in some form or fashion. People either leaving the business or finding those full-time jobs, especially regionally. And retention is based on full-time jobs and benefits. What's out there for them? Our goals are to continue to provide ALS EMS coverage. We're struggling with that even today to keep us at the advanced life support level, which is that paramedic level. Adding fire protection 24/7, because that was something that historically we relied on the folks responding from home for. We don't have time anymore with today's fires. You'll see that later. And we don't have the personnel to staff fire engines anymore, not consistently. It adds staffing to handle 2 simultaneous incidents, which happens so far this year, the first 6 months of the year, 1 in 4 of our incidents were back to back. Immediate, the bell rings for one, the bell rings for the next. And we can only handle one the way we're designed right now. Our last goal is to add full-time positions to help us with the retention and recruitment, to keep good people who love working for the community that is Lake Township, the village of Walbridge, the village of Millbury. We want to keep those people here that know this community. So what can we currently do? Our current level of service, minimum every day, is 2 people. One of those is a paramedic. We are struggling to even maintain that, as I said. So our minimum daily staffing is 2 people. EMTs, to kind of explain the difference between what we call BLS or ALS. Basic life support is EMTs that have taken about 6 months of training. They can do life-saving measures. That includes CPR. That includes helping you with some of your medications and giving oxygen. So they don't give out, or they don't administer a lot of medications. Paramedics, on the other hand, go through an entire pharmacology section of their 18 months of training. So think more like along the lines of a more pre-hospital focus, like nursing school. 18 months of training that they're actually looking to potentially make a degree program. It's so involved. Since May, we've been able to staff a 3rd position with money that we've saved because we don't have as many volunteers. So that line item in the budget had some extra money. We said, look, if we've got 3 people that are interested, we'll put a 3rd on and put them in a fire truck. And while this is not a fire engine, it's what we call Rescue 26. It's got hydraulic tools for injury accidents, a 230-gallon water tank that pumps at 150 gallons a minute. So to make that simple, you've only got a few minutes of water. The goal here for both of these rigs, and this is new within the last year, even it started just before I got here, we had fires where the ambulance was pulling up and standing in the yard. And it's been relayed to me that people were very confused about why they called for the fire department and got an ambulance. So we don't want them standing in the yard. What these crews will do, pulling up to a typical residential house fire today, is they will stretch a hose line off of that rescue that will protect the medic crew going in. The medic crew will take a thermal imaging camera that we purchased with the donation and go in and search for victims. So even if the house burns down because we can't get anyone else out the door, at least we've searched the places we can search to try and find you or your loved ones and get them out to safety. So that's the goal of having those 3 positions. We can provide EMS service right now for that first run. We can kind of provide some level of fire service, but it's not a full-blown engine. We don't have the staffing. Geographically, right now, it doesn't make sense, and there's limitations to the way the size of the station at Station 26. We didn't really want to split up 3 people, nor do we consistently have the 3 people together enough that we can put them on a fire engine together. We can handle the first call. We can't handle the second call most of the time. The rescue allows the potential that someone could branch off and go to that other call, but not in a transport to the hospital capacity. I told you 1 in 4 calls between January and June of this year. It was 1 in 5 for the whole year last year. So we're seeing an uptick in that, at least in the first 6 months of this year. Third call is out of the question. So we're calling mutual aid more and more. You can see the yellow line at the top is the total between fire and EMS. EMS has pretty consistently risen since 2017 is what you're looking at through last year. And obviously a lot of this stuff is just hit or miss. There's not really a rhyme or reason to a lot of our changes or a lot of our ups and downs. But we're trending upward across the board. Even fire has a slight uptick. So we're relying more on those mutual aid companies to come in and help us out. The problem is our mutual aid is busier too, busier than any of us have ever been before. Let's break down some of the Northern Wood County and some of our bordering agencies. The city of Perrysburg has 7 minimum fire and EMS personnel on station, ALS, that paramedic level, and they do 3,000 calls a year. Perrysburg Township has a minimum of 6 full-time fire and EMS personnel, also ALS. They do 2,000 calls a year. Rossford is part-time. Well, we're skipping right ahead. Rossford is part-time with 1,300 runs a year. They are BLS at minimum, and their minimum staffing, they don't actually have currently minimum staffing. They may be staffed. They may not be staffed right now because, again, this is a regional issue. Allen Clay, and a national issue, realistically. Allen Clay is part-time, again, BLS minimum, 1,200 runs a year. Northwood, just off to the north of us, 1,100 runs a year, part-time, BLS minimum. And then Troy Township, to our south, they help us out a lot along 420 all the way up to usually about the Turnpike if we need them to help. They are staffed 2 full-time people with ALS in service, and they do 550 runs a year. They're ahead of the game in terms of preparing for the future. We do 1,600 runs. We're the busiest part-time department in Northern Wood County. We are 400 short of Perrysburg Township, which has 6 full-time people on to handle their workload. And we're minimum part-time with 2, EMS only, and sustaining ALS as long as we can. So when we're calling Allen Clay, or we're calling Northwood, or we're calling Perrysburg Township, we're hoping they're in service. We're hoping they have someone available because they very well may not. So if you're not the first one to call 911, it may not be that, oh, well, it's going to be a Northwood ambulance and I'm okay with that. It may be a long time before an ambulance gets to your house. And it may be someone from further away than you're used to because we are all busy. So that demand challenge, just how busy are we? Here's our incidents 2014 all the way through what's projected for 2023 at this point. And you see that upward trend. Fire has been pretty steady, but that's even trending upward for us. And then EMS, we saw a big spike in 2021, kind of back down from that in 22, and we're headed right back up this year. We're about 5% over for 2023 compared to last year. Our average calls a day, for comparison, we were doing about 2.5 calls, so let's just say 3 calls a day in 2014. This year, if it continues as most of our year has, we'll be closer to 5 calls a year once you round up to that. So from 3 to 5. And while that may not seem like a lot at face value, again, all of these calls require us to ask people to drop everything at home and come to the station. So the difference between coming down for 3 calls compared to staying for 5 calls or coming back for 2 more after you spent 3 calls at the station, that's a lot. So that challenge is our volunteer-based model. And that volunteer is not in quotations in any sort of derogatory way. Volunteer historically in the fire service has been people who are not paid. What the term we use for our people, what we call them is paid per call firefighters, because they are paid per the call they come down for. They're not necessarily working a shift. It's if you're available, you come to the station. And here's their pay rate we standardized this year. At one point, we had the people working the shift, that minimum, that 2 or 3, were making more money than the people who were coming from home, and that didn't seem right. We were able to reclassify them by having them go through the part-time orientation and become eligible to sign up for shifts. And by doing that, our pay starts at $10.10 for a candidate. That is a person who has no certifications whatsoever, so they are brand new. And we're making sure they're going to stick around and go through the training, because the training is intensive, both on the fire side and the 6 months of EMS training. Firefighter EMTs rather make $17 an hour. Firefighter advanced EMTs, it's kind of a middle ground between EMT and paramedic. Still basic life support, $18.09 an hour. Our paramedics make $20.06 an hour. And then our company commanders, our lieutenants, $21.65. And then we do have a lieutenant acting right now as a station commander. So we go by classification and their role. So we have a little flexibility with their rank, as our department will likely grow in the next 5 to 10 years. So we wanted something that would last. The highest hourly rate we pay at that paid per call level is $23.39, and that's to someone responsible for an entire station. So all of Station 28 or all of Station 27. Again, I'm reiterating something that I've already hit a few times, but the lack of volunteer firefighters is a national challenge. This is not just limited to us. Like workplaces trying to find someone, your favorite restaurant's closed for the afternoon because you can't find anyone. We're asking people not only to have a full-time job, maybe a full-time and a part-time job, but then take this on as another part-time job, and then have requirements on top of that to follow through with training and with being around, and putting that training to use and giving you as citizens a return on your investment when we buy them $3,000 worth of gear. So many departments are struggling with this, and no one has the answer right now other than look toward moving to become full-time departments. This is also a state challenge, to the point where you see Governor Mike DeWine right there, the state fire marshal standing directly behind him with the red stripes on his sleeve. Governor DeWine ordered the fire marshal to put together this task force report and provide recommendations. And this isn't geared toward departments like ours, not nearly as much as it's geared toward smaller departments that do maybe 100, 150 runs a year. Southern Wood County, those kind of departments, that they're also struggling. They are trying to come up with creative ways to solve their problems as well. And they may be only doing, 100 runs a year, if that. So we were able to use some of the information out of the task force report, but we're at a turning point where other departments our size with our busyness have turned that next page into a full-time department. We're following that. And we already were discussing a lot of what was already discussed in the task force report. How do we encourage our volunteers to hang out at the station? We put in, we bought some used couches that are comfortable and clean, and they can come and play video games, and they're not getting paid, but they're there. They're going to save that time getting out the door. That's just one of the recommendations. But, we've got shifts that we don't fill, and we're paying people. So there's only so many creative options versus the one glaring, this is the fix. And that is ultimately becoming a full-time department. Obviously, this is a national problem. It's a state problem, and it is a Lake Township problem as well. It is a challenge that we're hoping to overcome. State of Ohio has seen a drop between 2018 and 2022 of almost 7%. That's how many volunteer firefighters the state has lost. And again, most of these departments are small, rural departments when you're looking at the entire state of Ohio. In Lake Township, we're down 37% from point to point, 2018 to 2022. What that looks like year to year, 2018 we had 35, dropped down to 24, bounced back up to 30, and we've been pretty much steady at 22 or 23 through September of 2023. That's pretty common. I just talked to a neighboring chief this morning, and they're right around the same spot with volunteers. They had a structure fire reported last night. They had 2 people show up at the station. We had a reported structure fire this morning. We had 2 people show up at the station. So we're all fishing from the same boat here. We're all trying to get the same pool of people. We're all trying to find those folks in our community who want to do this. But even out of 22 people to get 2, that's not sustainable when your house is on fire. That's not even a full crew that we can put to work to start putting that fire out. So question, why are volunteers leaving? Well, volunteers are leaving the fire service or not joining the fire service for a whole number of reasons. But locally here at Lake Township in 2023, we've been given 2 reasons. And exit interviews have been conducted with some of these members. That happens above me at the administrator level. But 3 people have retired, so that's our 37.5%. And then people not meeting the standards, 62.5%. That includes things like not finishing the required schooling in the amount of time, not giving the community return on investment, not being around at all. We follow up with these people, make sure there's nothing we can do to help them. But typically the answer we get is we're too busy. We're too busy to, go back to school and try that class again. We're too busy to get into a class. I got to worry about my full-time job, my kids, all these things that are absolutely valid. But they're still below the standard that we need to have for not only certifications, but also to make sure that these folks are trained well enough to come into your house and save a life or put out a fire. All of our classifications, including our part-time people, again, we're only part-time with those 2 people on the medic unit and the rescue. Other work and family becomes that other big section, 30%. I'm sorry, 29.4%. So we'll stick with 29% rounding down. 1 was promoted, so that accounts for 6% internally, but that's still something that happens. And that was a person we pulled away from a full-time job somewhere else. So we're all playing tug of war with these personnel as this pool becomes smaller, as fewer people want to volunteer, as fewer people want to work part-time once they find a full-time job. So let's look at our volunteer responses in 2023 just to paint this picture. So quarter 1's in blue, quarter 2's in red, quarter 3 is in yellow. And quarter 3, just to pull the numbers out, quarter 3 we had 434 calls. So in quarter 2 we had, if we go all the way to the right side of the graph, we had 100 plus runs. 1 person made 100 plus runs. 65 to 70, another person, and then we go down to kind of the big chunk, right, which is 0 to 40. 0 to 40 runs, and we're going to circle that right there. That's where most of our people are able to make runs. You see a big spike at 0 to 5, 5 to 10. So that's on the lower level, but let's just go with 40 at the most. That's still 10%. That's 10% of the runs that we're responding to. That's 10% of you calling for help or your neighbor calling for help. 1 in 10 times, these individuals will be able to be there. And again, we're not blaming them, but we need to face facts that they are not available. And that's okay. But if we want to maintain the level of service we're at, we've got to do something. And if we can maintain and enhance, let's talk about that. The least number of runs made for people that were actually paid in payroll, 1 run out of 400 or 0.2%. Those are the people that we try and follow up with and just make sure, hey, what can we do to help you make more runs? Can you pick up some shifts? Can you show some sort of commitment? Because again, we've paid thousands of dollars for their gear, for their training. And by we, I mean your fire department that you fund. So we need to make sure you're getting your fair return on your investment into the fire department. So I show this to explain that I'm not throwing stones from a house that's I'm not throwing stones. My analogy got all messed up. If you've made it this far, you get to enjoy me stumbling over my words there. I know where these people are coming from. I was a volunteer too, a part paid person responding from home, both at Rossford Fire from 2014 to 2018, and then at Portage Fire where I served as the fire chief. I was still, even if I was on shift, I would go on runs, but it wasn't it counted toward essentially how many runs out of the entire year. So I made 85 runs. We did about 100, I believe about 120 if that math adds up with that percentage there. So I was making 60% of the runs because a lot of our runs were coming in Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. Go back to Rossford, where it was sporadic and all over the place. And I worked a full-time job on a 24-hour on, 48-hour off schedule, and I was right around 24% the whole time. And that was at times exhausting to maintain, to be quite frank about it. But I'm also not somebody coming in from a career department. When I was working at both of these departments, I was working full-time at a large department in this area. I understand what it feels like to be tired and feel like you're not there for your citizens because you want to just take a nap, or you want to see your family, or you've got things to do. That's a lot to keep putting on our people. Our 2022 incidents by the hour, it starts at midnight on the left-hand side of the screen, goes to noon right in the middle, all the way back up to midnight on the right. We'll look at the number of incidents first, which is the axis on the left, all the way up to 100 per hour of the day. And our big spike falls right here between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. 10-hour chunk, right when people are working first shift, right when people are working their Monday through Friday full-time job. So let's look at what that looks like when we talk about incidents by the hour with the average number of personnel responding. And this does not include our minimum staffing. Our average, if you look at the axis on the right, the y-axis on the right, we see that we have an average of 2 people responding for that time period. And that is a combination of people staffing the station through that part-time fire staffing and administration taking calls. If it weren't for that, our duty crew, our on-duty folks would have no backup whatsoever because our folks are working. They're full-time jobs. So that's the struggle we have, is that would drop to 0. And we'll talk about administration in a little bit, actually right up next. But let's look at where our volunteers are available. They're available after our calls start to drop, after, say, about 6 o'clock. Our biggest window in 2022 with volunteers being available, those paid per call folks being available, was between 9 and 10. I can tell you we had a meeting recently where a call came in between 9 and 10 and we had 2 people show up. It's still hit or miss. Overnight, we had an average of 0 responders between midnight and 2 a.m. People need to get their sleep for their job the next day. So this is what we're looking at. And I've said before, I've been quoted on the news as saying, our volunteers are available the least when we need them the most. And that's not their fault. Just look inside that box. That's when we need them the most. But that's when most of them are working. They're working that first shift job. Some are traveling out of state. It's not like the old days where our folks were farmers and could pop out of the field and run to the fire station and take their one call of the week. Each of these days is 5, 6, 7. We've had 16 calls in one otherwise normal day. Not severe weather, not unusual circumstances, just 16 times people needed us in the community. So what about the administration? What about those full-time positions that we hold? Well, let's go over the 4 positions. The fire chief, that's me. I'm salary. I am on call 24/7, but I do not respond to every single run because then we wouldn't be able to run the fire department. I respond to high acuity runs, things that are life-threatening, as well as injury accidents and obviously fire calls. The deputy fire chief is part-time. That's Dave Henninger. He's hourly. He works in the office Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then otherwise, as needed, he comes in for drill night, and he also responds to those higher acuity calls and some medium acuity calls. So some of those that might be in the middle. But he is more a field supervisor than my role. My role is the 30,000-foot view of the department and keeping us moving. The captain, who's the EMS supervisor, he is salary. That's Captain Jason Sallows. He runs the EMS portion in terms of ensuring our scheduling is there, doing quality control of our report writing, sending information to billing, which brings us in a significant amount of money every year. So that is a position that if he is not doing those things, we could lose tens of thousands of dollars in just a month of not billing. He's also taking part right now in a mandatory Medicaid study, and that is $19,000 if we do not participate in that and get that paperwork done and in a timely manner. And then finally, our captain of planning, that's grants and training. That is Captain Brandon Rosebrock. He is also salary. The only exception for both of them is when they're filling in on the medic unit, Medic 26, they are not salary. That is overtime because of the nature of their jobs. And again, now we're looking at grant funding. Already this year, we've had $45,000 worth of grants because Captain Rosebrock is able to spend that time during the day making phone calls, making connections, gathering information from vendors to make sure our grants are written properly to the kind of equipment we need, to make sure the quotes are accurate. Without that, we are losing money. So, but we do make runs. We all make runs. Again, typically more the high acuity runs than the routine because we have to keep the department running. So Chief Henninger and I are about the same at 24% of runs. Captain Sallow's at about 1 in 5. A lot of Captain Sallows and Captain Rosebrock are jumping on the medic unit here at Station 28 to back up the other medic unit or to take a second run if they're in town. And that's part of the catch is, our folks are going through grant writing training or FEMA training that will help us if we have a train derailment like we saw in East Palestine. We need to be prepared for those sorts of things. And that means sometimes we're not in the office. And so we cannot count on administration as part of our daily staffing while also keeping the department running. So let's talk about paramedics now. There is a smaller pool of paramedics in this area, and that's because paramedics are in high demand. For the first time in my career, and honestly, even talking to my father who took fire and EMS tests in the 80s, this is the first time that people really have their pick of a full-time job because all the departments around us experiencing the same problems, departments that are significantly smaller than ours, have started shifting to full-time because they see the writing on the wall. They see our struggles, and we didn't really have that luxury being kind of the bigger departments in the area in terms of coming from the volunteer side. Right now, all we have is part-time employees, and while I feel happy for them, this is a challenge for us. They're becoming full-time employees somewhere else, and they have so many choices. These are just some of the options they have and some of the pay scales that we were able to find in their job postings online. Oregon Fire right up the road starts at 70 all the way up to 90,000 a year. City of Perrysburg tops out at 75,000 as a firefighter. Troy Township doing a third of the runs that we do, $53,000 a year. Toledo Fire starts at 50 up to 72,000. Monclova at 60, Springfield at 60, Sylvania at 60, Waterville over 60, Bowling Green over 60, ProMedica, if people want to go do private ambulance and not do the fireside at all, right now they're offering a $7,500 sign-on bonus just to take a job. So we are competing with all of these places, and every one that you see on the screen is full-time employment. We are the second or third job for almost everyone who works here at that part-time level. We're the second or third job for almost everyone that works here. We want to be the first job. We want to be the primary job. We want them to work in this community every several days. We want them to know this community and know how to get to your street that maybe, unless you grew up in Walbridge or unless you grew up in Millbury, you don't really know where that's at without having to look at a map. We want to get to the point where you don't have to look at a map. But when these folks are only working for us, contingent, some of them, once every 4 months, you can't build that kind of connection to the community, whether it's the maps or whether it's just knowing faces. So we're at a fork in the road right now. With the struggles we're facing, with the challenges that I've shared with you, we can't maintain EMS at the ALS level. It is just not feasible anymore. We have lost too many paramedics to full-time jobs. So we can drop to BLS. There's no new cost. That's the basic life support. No new cost. And we're still going to be somewhat levy dependent. There is a renewal levy we'll have to put on the ballot in 2025 to help support that, to help support our continuing operations as a fire and EMS department. On the other hand, we can enhance our current level of service, continue our ALS protection, and add fire protection. But of course, any increase, any improvement comes with a higher cost. And that's that 4.2 mil levy on this November's ballot. And it's continuing, and it says layoffs in parentheses there, because if we made it something that we had to renew every 5 years, I won't be able to recruit anybody anyway. We could have full-time positions, but if somebody knows, hey, within the next 5 years, I want to have kids, I want to settle down, I might want to buy a house in the community that I'm working in, Well, if in 5 years we have to lay everyone off because the levy fails, we didn't solve the problem. We kicked the can down the road. So it had to be continuing for that reason in my eyes, and that's why that was the recommendation I made to the trustees, who obviously, by their vote of unanimous vote, putting this on the levy, putting this levy on the ballot rather, they supported that. This needs to be something that we do, and we're all in on it because we need to be all in on the safety of this community. So what exactly does this enhanced service and staffing look like to you? Well, the first question, of course, here's the cost. Here's what this will cost you every month. If your property is valued at $100,000, your monthly cost is $1,225 a month. $1,225 a month. That is, I believe, still cheaper than Netflix. I think they upped their prices again. That's probably less than anybody would pay for a daily coffee, working a Monday through Friday job. And for $1,225 a month, you're going to get a full-time fire department, staffed, ready to go. Obviously, double that if your value's at closer to $200,000, and then triple that if it's at $300,000. But there's your general idea, of course, the source being the Wood County Auditor's Office. One of the questions that came up, I'm going to go back to that for 1 second. Are levies from the past? Yes, this would be an additional levy on top of everything, all the other levies we have, which is 4 additional levies that date back to the 1990s, the early 1990s. Those, even if your appraisal increases, those cannot bring any more money in than they were designed to at that moment. So the millage is adjusted, and this is what we were told by the auditor's office. The millage is adjusted to not go over that initial income. So those, if your appraisal goes up, or if your appraisal did go up this year, your appraised value of your home or your property, then that millage will come down to offset that. And we will still bring in only as much as we brought in. That was, again, the explanation provided to Fiscal Officer Buddy Ritson by the Wood County Auditor. Unfortunately, and this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek slide, but these right now are our other consistent options for funding. We don't have other options. We're a township, so all we can do is property tax in terms of taxing. People have asked about, well, can we get donations from different businesses in the community? Well, we can absolutely ask for money, but personnel costs are expensive. And so if we get money one time, that still doesn't fix the problem in the long term. So as I hinted at earlier, going back to 1990, we've got 4 levies in place. They bring in anywhere from $133,000 a year up to $333,000 a year rather. And again, this is kind of separated in some elements as ambulance and EMS, fire and EMS. But we operate with 2 budgets under one umbrella, which is the Lake Township Fire Department. Our continuous money that we're bringing in is $720,000, a little over that. Our 5-year brings in an additional $236,000, $237 if you round up there, and gets us close to $958,000 that we bring in. So what does that look like in terms of our current budget? Well, our current budget is $1.6 million total, 1.7. I'm getting bad at the rounding. Thanks for bearing with me. Our personnel costs are 63% of that. Our other costs are 37%. So we're looking at personnel is $1 million right now. Our other costs are $629. The proposed budget, by that 4.2 mil levy bringing in an estimated a little under $1.2 million, this is what our proposed budget looks like. We add that full-time personnel that goes under fire in this instance, and there's a reason for that we'll talk about. And personnel would be $2.3 million of the total budget, and the other section of the budget would not change. So we're at 78% personnel, 22% other. So the reason it stays under fire is there are grants available for fire staffing. And if we're able to get those grants, and the reason the budget, or the correction, the levy is not written on the ballot as just for staffing, if we do that, we pigeonhole ourselves into not being able to use that money if we're able to offset some of that cost with a grant. So the cost per employee here, this is all just numbers at this point. Nothing is set in stone. But let's start a firefighter EMT at 51,000. That's 23.36 an hour. We give them 3% per year for longevity, and they max out at 3 years. A firefighter paramedic, we pay them a little more, 54,000. Same deal, 3% longevity per year, max out at 3 years. And then the company commanders, the reason this is so much higher, there's two reasons. One, they don't have the longevity pay. And two, if we have consistency at the company commander level, that lieutenant or captain, that immediate supervisor, then even if we have some turnover below them and we can retain the person who sets the tone and sets the culture, sets the training, then that's worth investing some money into those folks. Take all of those, add into that 25% for Ohio Police and Fire pension and $32,000 of the township's portion of their family insurance. And again, for budgeting purposes, we're going to look at the more costly, and the family insurance plan is the one that requires more of a contribution from the township. So the base cost per employee, per position, $95,000 for a firefighter EMT, $99,000 for a firefighter paramedic, and $130,000 for a company commander. And the question came up, well, doesn't that person make more than you as a company commander? Yes, right now they do. And that's not uncommon in the fire service, especially when you consider an overtime. So I make $76,000. It's not, it's public knowledge. It's not a secret. But at this point, I'll be fine with that. It's not gonna, I'm not putting ego or my pocketbook ahead of what's doing right with the community. This is the right thing. This is what we need to do to move forward, is at least look at how we're going to retain some of these folks for the long term. And I'm not going to worry about myself first, because that's not what we get in the fire service for. So exactly what does all this get you? The $1.2 million with those positions and the cost per position, here's what that gets you. We'll use the proposed levy funds to hire 3 people per shift in a total of 4 shifts. So 4 company commanders and 8, ideally as many firefighter paramedics as we can get. Our current funding will continue to pay for 2 positions, the part-time or contingent, firefighter EMTs minimum, firefighter paramedics would be fantastic as well. And we will continue to have the paid per call folks, the historically called volunteers. They will still continue to support the operations, and they will, as now, get preferential treatment to ride the apparatus on a shift if they so choose. What this does for you in terms of the apparatus that we're actually going to staff. We'll have a staffed fire suppression apparatus, probably a fire engine, with a lieutenant, that company commander, firefighter paramedic, and firefighter EMT. This is just an example. We'd have an ALS ambulance with a firefighter paramedic and a firefighter EMT. And then what you see at the end is the firefighter paramedic and firefighter EMT from that fire suppression rig that are able to move over to that other ambulance and take a run if that second run comes in, which, as you've learned by now, happens quite often to us. So why add fire to this? Why add the fire service when we're focused on 80% of what we do is EMS? Well, residential building fires are down, so that doesn't seem to really add to the reason we would do fire. But this kind of puts things in perspective. Residential building fire deaths are trending up in the United States. This is from 2011 to 2020. And we're seeing a dramatic incline for what this is. I mean, this is a graph with people's lives on it. And we went up over 2,800 deaths a year in 2019. We dropped down in 2020. A lot of that more than likely had to do with people being at home during COVID and not leaving the house with loved ones sleeping or, candles burning or things like that. But it will be interesting to see what that looks like for 2021 and 2022 when that data comes out. In addition to that, residential building fire dollar loss is up and trending up. And it was significantly higher in 2020, which is odd considering the deaths were down, but we are seeing that continue to follow the trend. The overall trend is it's getting more expensive. So, we take an oath to save lives and property. And this is a video that I'm hoping will work in this recorded form. If not, I'll post a link right below this. The comparison of room furnishings. So legacy room is what we're talking about from, the 1900s, 1910s, 20s, 30s, 40s, even into the 50s. That's the cotton, the wood, the natural things that are around us. But if you look around you right now, take a second, look around your room. Nothing's going to happen on the PowerPoint yet. And what's around you right now? I'm looking at a lot of plastic in my office. I've got chairs wrapped in plastic. I've got plastic covers on books. I've got a bookshelf that's held together with glue and has plastic binders all over it, a printer, all of this stuff, your IKEA furniture, your synthetic materials, that's all plastic. And all plastic is, if you go back to elementary school and think about the states of matter, solid, liquid, and gas. Well, plastic is just frozen gasoline. It's a petroleum product. So your modern room is that frozen gasoline room, and your legacy room is your natural fibers. So let's watch this, and I'll kind of narrate as we go. We're at 0 seconds, right? We're 5 seconds from the time the fire started. So no one even knows there's a fire yet, right? The smoke alarm doesn't even have smoke to pick up yet. 2 things you can do today to ensure your family is significantly safer. 1, make sure your smoke alarms are working, the batteries are good, everything there is working great, and you've talked about your plan with your kids or with your loved ones that live with you about getting out of the house. The second thing is sleep with your doors closed at night, and you'll see why as this progresses. We're 45 seconds in. We're starting to see a little smoke maybe. Yep, you can see the flames on the couch on the legacy room side. And now we're seeing some thicker smoke on the modern room side. So now maybe somebody sees it. The smoke alarm's probably going off in the modern room. So let's say they called 911 right now. And in Wood County, we're lucky to have dispatchers that are trained to gather information about fires from you. So they're going to gather that as they're simultaneously dispatching us, and we'll say that takes about 20 seconds. So at 1:40, Lake Township Fire, you have a report of a structure fire at 1911 Ayers Road. Lake Township Fire, you have a report of a structure fire, 1911 Ayers Road. Use channel 4. That's what they're going to tell us on the radio. That's the channel we're going to switch our walkie-talkies to. We're getting dressed right now. We're putting our bunker pants on, our bunker coat on. We're getting in our fire apparatus. That's if we're at the station. If we're at home, we're fine. We're grabbing our pants off the corner of the door. We're grabbing our car keys. We're kissing our loved ones goodbye. And we're running out that door and hopping in our car and driving to the station. Our standard is out the door in a minute or less for our staffed personnel. We're not there yet. We've still got 13, 12, 11, 10 seconds because they have to get dressed. They have to have all their gear on. So when they pull up, all they have to do is throw that breathing air bottle on their back and put a mask on and come in to save you. But we're at 2 minutes and 45 seconds since the fire started. We're only a minute from when we got dispatched out. And look at that black smoke banking down. All smoke is unburned fuel. And that smoke is a killer. The smoke is the first killer. The heat is the second killer, typically. And compare that to the legacy room from the 1940s. Maybe you have some stuff around that's still not polyester or not nylon. But not much of us do. Look at the steam coming off. It looks like steam, but that gas that's coming off the floor in the modern room, that is the solids in the room turning directly into gas, skipping over the liquid phase altogether. And what we're seeing is all of that vapor will simultaneously combust right about now. And that's flashover. That's the term we use for everything in the room, no matter what it's made out of, no matter its size, no matter alive or dead. It all catches on fire at the exact same time. Everything else that's not already on fire. flashover. That whole room is now completely fire. We're 4 minutes in. We have a large township. Our response times are anywhere from a minute or two to upwards of 9 minutes. We obviously have trains as well. And we're 4 minutes in. And we've only gone, about 3 minutes from being dispatched. So when we talk about volunteers and why can't we do this with volunteers anymore? Why do we need to staff the fire side? Well, holy cow. The reality is we don't have the time that my dad was a volunteer firefighter. He had, look at this, 10 minutes, and that's what that legacy room looks like. 15 minutes, and the legacy room looks like that, just little flames. 19 minutes. 20 now. 25 minutes. For that same size room with just older furnishings to flash over, it took, it's going to show us here in just a second, because that's not even at flashover yet. You can see the flowers in what looks like that flower pot are not on fire yet. So we have not flashed over yet. The clock is still ticking. Those people still have, you could lay on the floor in that room, no joke about it. If you had to lay on the floor in that room or crawl through that room to get out from wherever you were, you could still do that right now. Your clock is ticking, but you could quickly do that. And it's probably going to hurt. But at that very ground level, staying as low as you can, that's why we teach that. Now we're getting closer to flashover. Now is where you can see it's coming off the carpet. That's where you lost your chance to get out. But we're 29 minutes and 27, 28, 20, 25, 29, 25 for flashover. So my dad, when he was a volunteer firefighter in the late 80s, early 90s, there were still a lot of legacy rooms out there. And so the 10 minutes or 15 extra minutes it took us to get to the state, it took him rather, to leave my house, kiss me on the head, leave my house and get to the fire wasn't working against the citizens nearly as much as it is now. So we could have 60, we could have 100 volunteers. And there's two things we know right now. One, only a handful of them would be able to make a significant number of runs because that's what we've seen consistently. That's what other departments are seeing consistently. And two, we are working against a clock as fires grow and spread faster than ever before because we are surrounded by solid gasoline. We need people at the station. We can still be supported by volunteers, which we absolutely will be, but we need to get a fire engine out the door to get there as soon as possible. We may not make it before that 3 minutes and 40 seconds. But if that door is closed, that plays a huge difference in how much of your home is gone by the time we get there. We're looking at a difference between half of your house missing in the first 15, 20 minutes these days versus it was unheard of to burn a house to the ground with early notification back in the day. So to recap the challenges, demand is up, volunteer numbers are down, paramedics are going anywhere they can find full-time jobs and benefits because everybody around us is offering them because they've already made the transition that we're asking you to consider. Because in our mind, our goals based on what you've told us your expectations are at Q&As and meeting you at PR events and going to senior centers and going to block watch meetings is to continue providing the ALS coverage you've come to expect from us, to add fire protection 24/7, to add staffing to handle back-to-back runs because you don't know if you're the first one to call 911, the second one, or the third one. They won't tell you. That's not part of the thing. That's not part of the call taker's job. You won't know who's going to be coming to your emergency and how long it's going to take them if we're already on a run. And a last goal, to add full-time positions to aid in that recruitment and retention. But here's the reality. It is absolutely up to you. We are proposing this. The 4.2 mil levy factors into the fire district plan with the goal that if we move forward on a fire district, we will not have to come back to you to ask for more. That is the last thing I want to do. That is the last thing I know a lot of you are looking at this levy saying, I've heard it several times. I support you, but I can't afford you. We understand. We absolutely understand fixed incomes and the challenges in today's financial world. So I want you to know one last thing before I go. And that is, no matter if the levy passes or fails, you will not see a change in effort. You will still see the hardworking men and women doing the best they can with what you are giving us as the taxpayers. They will do the absolute best, and we will have the best people coming to serve you that we can get. But if the levy fails, you will see a change in service. There's no doubt about that, because we cannot maintain where we're at today. With that, I've been Chief Barrett Dorner here with you to talk about this levy and give you as much information as I can. I know this was a long presentation. If you've made it this far, thank you for sticking it out to get the most educated you can before you go vote in the polls. And my email address is firechief@laketwp.com. If you do have any follow-up questions, if you'd like to reach me, please feel free to email or to call anytime. I, just like my firefighters that I'm lucky to serve, we're all here for you.